Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen.
And I'm Dennis Ward.
So in Manitoba now, we're starting off where incarceration rates are one of the highest in the country, according to Statistics Canada. Earlier this year, the province committed to diverting offenders away from jail and into restorative justice programs. Brittany Hobson sat down with one couple who went through the program.
My worst case scenario, I was thinking in my head, I'm going to get like a month in Dauphin jail. That's what I was thinking. That was my worst.
This was one of the realities Donovan Sutherland faced nearly 3 months ago. That changed when the 18-year-old decided to get help navigating the criminal justice system. He is one of the 4,500 people who went through a restorative justice program in Manitoba this year.
It could open my mind to different things and different perspectives, and so yeah, I guess after going through those things and getting my charges dropped, it did kind of rearrange my thinking and all that.
As a first-time offender, Sutherland is using the restorative justice program to take responsibility for his actions and commit to rehabilitation. Sutherland was charged with aggravated assault and domestic assault stemming from an incident this past summer with his partner Lisa Chubb. The two got in an argument while under the influence, but Chubb says she initially started the fight and Sutherland was defending himself.
Having his charges dropped really brought out a lot. Like, it made me feel like, right on, like, you're not getting charged for something you didn't do.
The two are working with Crystal Nepenak, a criminal justice worker in Pine Creek First Nation. As part of the restoration, Sutherland participated in traditional healing.
Me going to sweats and traditional things, it's really helped with bettering myself, bettering her, my family, friends, people around me, my community. And basically talking to Crystal and going through all this stuff is like making me want to do better for myself, for her, our baby on the way.
Manitoba ranks second for the highest number of Indigenous adult inmates in the country. 74% are Indigenous, but make up only 15% of the overall population in the province.
I like to think of our position as community justice workers as not only working with the community, but also being eyes and ears in the court system, of saying, okay, we're representatives of our people, we're sitting in a courtroom, we're listening, we're witnessing what's happening, and we're witnessing how our people are being treated also.
The provincial government has committed to lowering incarceration rates. Earlier this year, it released a strategy to divert more people away from jail, something Nepenak says the Western system doesn't do.
A lot of our people going right to court, there's nothing learned at all. But when they come through our program, they start to understand more of the process and how they got there, why they're there, and what it takes to get out of there.
Nepenak is one of 5 criminal justice workers the Southern Chiefs organization employs. Out of the 34 First Nations SCO represents, only 13 communities are covered under the restorative justice program. The organization is working toward expanding its reach. Nepenak feels the program is successful. She's witnessed it with Sutherland and Chubb.
They're so involved now in the community, and they're so active. They're a new couple, they're going to have a baby, and they're so actively trying now to attend any program that they could that will help them be stronger as a family.
Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Pine Creek First Nation.
The Assembly of First Nations is getting a lot more attention from the Prime Minister than with the previous government. But one response from Prime Minister Trudeau put the focus back on him. It happened at the opening of the question and answer session at last week's Special Chiefs Assembly with Chief Judy Wilson at the mic.
I'm Chief Judy Wilson from Niskanet Indian Band in BC. I'm also from the Union BC Indian Chiefs. I thank you for your words, Prime Minister, and I want to correct one thing. This is unceded land of the Algonquin peoples, and I wanted to be able to have you say that every time you come here, and any time your ministers come here, unceded lands of the Algonquin people, because that's so important, and its ancestors are here. And the other thing, I applaud the work we're doing on children and family and languages, But Prime Minister, when you're talking about the United Nations and you're going to go along with the self-determination and the consent, why wasn't that applied with the Trans Mountain Pipeline that's going through 513 kilometres of our territory? There was no consent. I want to say more, but I don't want to go past that. I just want to say there was no consent on that, and you can't count a few IBAs that you've done with some of the communities as consent, because it's the proper title holders of those nations that hold the title, and it's the bands that might have been under duress or whatever reasons they did that, but it's not a proper process at all. We have to get to a proper process of consent, Prime Minister.
I appreciate those words very much, Judy. Thank you for speaking so straightly. I would be careful about minimizing or ascribing reasons for people who take positions that disagree with you. I think there are lots of reasons, and I think we should respect people's choices to support or not support different projects, and I don't think we should be criticizing them just because they disagree with you, Judy. But I absolutely recognize that this is a process. The process of achieving consent, the process of respect and partnership means engaging in real substantive conversations, listening to concerns and responding to those concerns. From the very beginning, we recognized that the previous government had failed to engage appropriately with communities, with Indigenous peoples, and indeed with the environmental science that needed to happen before people in general would allow them to move forward on getting our resources to markets other than the United States. This is obviously something that is important to many, many people, but it is also a process that is important to get right. And that is why we put forward a new process, a renewed process to actually have strong and engaged conversations, and why when the Federal Court of Appeals came back and said, no, you have to do it better and you have to engage in it further, we are in the process now of going back and listening even more.
To recap, that was the scene at the beginning of the Q&A session at the Special Chiefs Assembly in Ottawa, Ontario on December 4th. Joining us now from Vancouver is Chief Judy Wilson. Chief Wilson, we just listened to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's response to you last week in Ottawa. Tell us your perspective on why the Union of BC Indian Chiefs called his response to you sexist and asked for an apology from the Prime Minister.
Well, after the response from Prime Minister Trudeau at the Assembly of First Nations, I received a lot of calls, texts from many women across Canada, and also many other chiefs and leaders, and actually some comments from some senators and staff in regard to how Trudeau treated the question, which was a simple question on consent and the United Nations Declaration, on how they could be doing that work with reconciliation but putting a pipeline through our territory without our consent. But he turned it into a division, the way he addressed me personally as just Judy, and also saying that just because people don't agree with you, and I was saying a lot of our elders and our knowledge keepers and our people at home are the ones that are proper title holders, are the ones that gave me the message, and we've been upholding their decision on no pipeline in our territory. So he actually minimized and reduced it to and divided our nation further on this issue.
And so now that the AFN passed a resolution voting down the Indigenous rights framework, where does the implementation of Indigenous rights in Canada go from here?
Well, I know with the Bill 262, it's at the Senate. So implementation is going to be really key on the United Nations Declaration on the rights of Indigenous people, and in the province here also the number one and under the commitment document is the implementation of the UN Declaration. So those free, prior, informed consent and self-determination are key, foundational and center of the discussions in around reconciliation. So I can't see what the Prime Minister is doing with outright purchase of the pipeline and also without the proper processes in and around consent. And I think the National Energy Board court ruling was also finding there are a lot of flaws in that entire process.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chief Judy Wilson, for joining us and sharing that wonderful rest of your afternoon there.
Okay, thank you.
Time for us to take a quick break, but stick around. We still have more news to come.
But first, here's a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, -5 and sunny in Halifax, sunny and -6 for Fredericton, -9 under sunny skies for Nain, 14 below for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, -15 in Chibougamau, 13 below in Saguenay, +5 in Toronto, 4 above in Sarnia and London, +1 with showers for Thunder Bay and Wawa, -2 in Sioux Lookout, -3 in God's Lake, -7 for Puckatawagan. -3 and rain potentially in Winnipeg, 0 in Dauphin. In Saskatchewan, 0s for North Battleford, Saskatoon, and Estevan. -8 in Uranium City, 0 for Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. Colonialism is the leading cause of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. That was just some of what was heard at the National Inquiry today. The commissioners are wrapping up the public hearings in Ottawa. Angel Moore reports.
Summer Rain Bentham from the Battered Women's Support Services says Canada fails to respond to the safety of Indigenous women and girls.
This attitude or belief is entrenched by Canada's policing agencies and systems, which have historically and currently been a brutal force of oppression and perpetration of violence against Indigenous women and girls.
The inquiry was reminded that the Indian Act is the most effective tool of colonialism that discriminates against women.
Reflects the pure racism of an underlying assumption that Indigenous people should be eradicated, combined with Victorian patriarchal ideas, a combination that has proved deadly for Indigenous women.
Bentham says Canada is in crisis across the country.
This is not an Indian problem. This is a Canadian state problem, as the deaths and disappearances of Indigenous women and girls continue to rise.
The Winnipeg Police told the inquiry they have been working to improve police practices since the mid-1990s. They have reached out to elders to learn about residential schools, the 60 Scoop, and the challenges of transitioning to an urban environment.
That was training by exposure to bias awareness, confronting our own biasing, and policing our own misperceptions about the people we are exposed to. And I can tell you on a personal note, it was eye-opening.
The inquiry will continue tomorrow, starting with the Government of Ontario. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Ottawa.
And we'd like to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous news.
Earlier this afternoon, InFocus examined what we're teaching our kids and if children are getting enough Indigenous content at school. Here's some highlights.
I think what people are, at least the ones that have stepped forward to risk learning, are trying to take what we've always had as Indigenous people and show others what that looks like, what that sounds like, what that feels like. An example is taking young people to sweat lodges that they've never been before. And not just Indigenous kids, taking all kids who want to go and want to learn about that. I know that in our school division, Indigenous learning is for everyone. It's not just for Indigenous kids.
Last year we started with a program called Walking the Path. That program was created by the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, and it's an 11-module program that specifically offers teachings on important topics such as the history of residential school, another module's on reconciliation, the 7 grandfather teachings, the medicine wheel. It was grade 6 level that we targeted, and I'm currently in 2 schools this fall, and I'll be doing 3 or 4 more schools into the new year. But the feedback that I get from the teachers and the students, and also other staff from the board, are really think that this is a good program. It gets a weekly 75-minute engagement, learning about from the program, and then also too, it's nice to see that the non-Indigenous students getting really interested and engaged too, and learning about the culture.
A report released today by Ontario's police watchdog found that systemic racism within the Thunder Bay Police Service and called for a review of 9 sudden death cases there. The report by the Office of the Independent Police Review Director was 2 years in the making. APTN's Willow Fiddler reports.
The head of the police watchdog organization called his findings nothing short of a crisis.
I found that the efficiencies in how the Thunder Bay Police was investigating Indigenous sudden deaths were so problematic that I have recommended at least 9 of these cases should be reinvestigated by a multidisciplinary team.
That's just one of the 44 recommendations revealed in the report on how Thunder Bay Police investigates Indigenous people. It included a review of 37 sudden death and missing persons investigations.
A number of investigators lack the expertise and the experience to conduct sudden death or homicide investigations.
APTN News believes 4 of those cases involve First Nations youth whose deaths were examined in the student inquest: Jethro Anderson, Kyle Morriso, Jordan Wabass, and Curran Strang. Last winter, McNeely found similar deficiencies in the death investigation of Stacey DeBungy, a man found drowned in the McIntyre River. He says it should have been investigated as a homicide. McNeely says racism played a role in DeBungy's case and others.
I found that in my review of cases, Thunder Bay Police Service investigators, they failed on an unacceptably high number of occasions to treat or protect the deceased and his or her family equally and without discrimination because the deceased was Indigenous.
So McNeely is also recommending that Thunder Bay Police should establish a major crimes unit that complies with provincial standards in how it investigates serious and complex cases. Thunder Bay Police should fully integrate the Aboriginal Liaison Unit's role into additional areas of the police service. On an annual basis, Thunder Bay Police should provide the public with reports that provide data on sudden death investigations, and that the Thunder Bay Police leadership should publicly and formally acknowledge that racism exists at all levels within the police service, and it will not tolerate racist views or actions.
I need to talk the talk. I am at the top, and I need to lead by example. And you know that I lead with a lot of integrity.
A short time later, the Thunder Bay Police released a statement on the report. The Thunder Bay Police Service is formally acknowledging that it must address the systemic racism, barriers, and biases that exist within its service. Thunder Bay Police has 3 years to work on the recommendations, and McNeely says he will monitor the progress annually. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
You can find much more on the report released today, including all of the recommendations and information on 7 of the 9 cases the police watchdog should be reviewed on our website, aptnnews.ca.
A new review presented at an international environmental conference in Poland has confirmed what many suspected, that climate change makes extreme weather events more likely and more intense. Researchers analyzed over 100 scientific papers and found climate change is contributing to droughts, storms, and heat waves. This comes as almost 200 countries attend the UN climate talks in Poland, where they're facing pressure to finalize the 2015 Paris Accord. The conference is also meant to push countries to commit to more ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
We're going to check in on the construction of the first of its kind Inuit Art Centre.
That's after the break, but here's the rest of tomorrow's weather.
0 and sunny for Peace River and Grand Prairie. +7 in Medicine Hat, +8 in Lethbridge, 6 above for Calgary. Rain and 11 for Tofino, rain and +10 for Victoria. -12 for Fort Nelson, 5 above with rain in Prince Rupert. -20 in Dawson and Beaver Creek, 11 below in Whitehorse. -21 in snow for Norman Wells. -20 in Wrigley, 18 below for Fort Simpson. -22 in Sax Harbor, -23 in Paulatuck. In Nunavut, -8 for Whale Cove, 9 below in Chesterfield. -18 in Clyde River, -28 in Resolute.
Welcome back. It's been a dream for decades. Now the Inuit Art Centre in Winnipeg is becoming a reality. Our Daryl Stranger brings us up to date.
The Winnipeg Art Gallery is adding a $65 million expansion dedicated to Inuit art. Construction of the Inuit Art Centre has been underway since they officially broke ground in May.
It's hard to see the construction of the Inuit Art Centre right now, but somebody built these little peepholes so we can check in on the progress.
This site will be home for thousands of pieces of Inuit artworks. The dramatic design was inspired by the North to display the Inuit treasures. The architect scrapped the design he had after visiting with the people of northern Canada. The world's largest collection of Inuit art is currently stored in this basement vault at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. The new vault will house all of the Inuit art currently stored here.
The vault's design is really quite interesting. It's curved in several different ways so that when the viewer approaches the vault, you'll have a sense of being enclosed. You'll have art all the way around you rather than just looking at a flat surface.
The bold new design will be the first of its kind in the world. From the openness of the center to the way the art is displayed, Darlene says there's so much to look ahead to.
You know, we've been planning for it for so long, and it's exciting to actually look outside and see that big crane and the big hole in the ground and to actually see the concrete being poured. I mean, it's almost like, wow, this is really happening. So it's really exciting.
The new Inuit Art Centre is due to open sometime in 2020. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Happening today in orbit, about 400 kilometers overhead, a pair of Russian cosmonauts are conducting a spacewalk to get to the bottom of a mystery. The cosmonauts are inspecting a mysterious puncture in a Soyuz spacecraft currently docked at the space station. The leak was discovered back in August. It was first thought to be caused by a small meteorite, but it was since determined the hole was made from the inside, leading to speculation in Russian media about sabotage. The Soyuz is set to take 3 other crew back to Earth December 19th. If I'm in space, I don't want to hear anything about sabotage or a leak or a puncture.
It's like, who do you think got up there to sabotage it?
Yikes. Well, that is about all the time we have for your news tonight. I'm Dennis Ward.
You can watch that episode of InFocus on our Facebook page, or it reruns here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Have a great night.